Hey guys, Sasquatch here. So we're just in the Sasquatch layer here. It's February 21st, 2025. And we don't usually do current events on the channel, but it's really relevant to my channel and a lot of the things that I talk about. But we had a 4.8 magnitude earthquake in southern BC, which is quite notable because that's when you can start to feel earthquakes, right? Or 4 or 5 is when you can start to feel it. There has been some pauses put on infrastructure. You know, they wanted to inspect some bridges, inspect the dock. For anybody that doesn't know, southern BC experienced an earthquake today. At first, it was thought to be a 5.1, but it was downgraded to a 4.8 on the Richter scale. And I was sitting in my house, and you could feel the house start shaking. Like I heard, it was weird. Initially, I heard what sounded like a truck. And I thought, oh, well, maybe somebody's just delivering something. And then I heard a big thump. And I was like, oh, maybe somebody dropped a box off. But it was like the ground shook. The ground was shaking while this was happening. So I was like, oh, interesting. And then I just went back to what I was doing. And then sure enough, a couple minutes later, you start seeing, things everywhere about, oh, there's an earthquake just near Seashelt, which is just on the Sunshine Coast in Vancouver. I think 20 kilometers away from Seashelt. That would be right around here, guys. Right in here, if you can see the mouse. Right here. So this is the Cascadia subduction zone. This isn't the whole portion of it, but this is the portion that concerns us for this video. I'm going to talk about what happened today and also what this is, because it's stirring up about the big one. One of the first questions people were asking is, oh, is this going to be the big one? Like, are we in for the big one? And no, guys, the earthquake happened over here. The main fault, the plate boundary, is this one. So this is where the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting under the North American plate. And so as you can see from the bottom here, so you have the mantle, right? So lava plumes up and causes uplift in the crust, which causes the crust to move east-west direction. So as this Juan de Fuca plate is moving, it hits the North American plate, and then it subducts underneath the plate, the North American plate, and burns off in the earth, right? And you can see the burn off here. And then these little squares here, these are all volcanoes. So, this is Mount Baker, that's Mount Rainier, that's Mount St. Helens, that's Mount Hood, and that would be Jefferson. The Richter scale is logarithmic. So for each factor of 1, the rate of its effect is increased by 10. An earthquake that is a magnitude 3 versus an earthquake that is a magnitude 5, that magnitude 5 earthquake is 20 times worse than the magnitude 3. So once you start getting into magnitude 4, magnitude 5, that's when people start worrying about damage to houses, damage to infrastructure. And in Vancouver, actually, they delayed one of the ferries from docking because they were worried about structural damage to docks and stuff. So we're going to just talk about what happened today, what that means going forward, the Cascadia Megaquake, what is that and what does that mean? And does this event have anything to do with the Cascadia Megaquake, and should we be worried about it? So we're going to look at some news clips, some pictures, and just have a little discussion about a whole bunch of different things, because there's a lot of things at play here, and it's actually quite complicated. So, but the root cause of all of this is the Ring of Fire, guys. So this is off the USGS, and you can see here they've got the Pacific Ocean. Pacific Ocean is a very tectonically active region, and because of this, it creates what we know as the Ring of Fire, right? So you can see all along here, and South America's cropped out here because it lies really far to the east, South America. Surprisingly, like, even some of the most eastern points in North America are west of South America. So South America's cropped out here, but the Nazca plate is what's causing all the issues for like Chile and stuff. Cocos plate in the Caribbean, but this is the Juan de Fuca plate here, which is what's causing all of our issues in the Cascadia subduction zone. So you can see here, guys, look all the way around, right? This is the Philippines, right? This is where you hear about all these problems. Japan's right in the heart of it. So a lot of things at play here, but this is the root cause of all these volcanoes all along, the Pacific, whether you're in Asia, Australia, or North America, South America. This is what's causing, you can see how the plate's moving. So that's the root cause of, why do we have so many earthquakes all along here? And BC actually experiences quite a bit. There's different connections, different plate boundaries, depending on like where you are in the zone. And the primary zone that everybody's worried about is the Pacific plate subducting under the North American plate, but there's, the Explorer plate and a whole bunch of other plates, which we'll look at. The quake today came from one of the less significant plates, but nonetheless, it still stirred up quite a bit of stuff in Vancouver. and people were quite curious about it. This is the southern BC area. This would be Lower Mainland, Vancouver, Squamish, Sechelt, Nanaimo, Vancouver Island. This is the area that was primarily affected. So this is where it happened, right around here. It was a shallow quake, shaking felt in Vancouver and Vancouver Island, and it was a 4.8, and it occurred at 126 at a depth of about 10 kilometers. So that's fairly shallow, believe it or not, for an earthquake. And, you know, obviously the closer you were to here, the more you would feel it. But this is a close-up of the Cascadia subduction zone. So you can see the Juan de Fuca plate here, the subduction zone, and then North America. And so this is basically what's happening in depth of subduction, thrust faults, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers, right? So it can go quite far down. And then the latitude, 45 degrees to 50 degrees, and then longitude, right? Just gives you an idea of where this is all happening. What is the Cascadia Megaquake and why is it important? Well, the Cascadia Megaquake is what is referred to as the big one, which means it could be a 9.0 or bigger, guys. We had a 4.8. That would mean that if it was a 9, it'd be about 40 times worse, but because it was a 4.8, it'd be like, 8 times worse, basically. So a big question that everybody's asking now because of this earthquake is like, well, what does this mean for going forward? So just to give you a visual representation of why it's so bad. So theoretically, if we had a magnitude 9.0 earthquake in Cascadia, which is basically Oregon, Washington, BC, what would that mean? And so Richter scale is a logarithmic scale, calculates the earthquake size by measuring ground motion on seismographs, invented by Charles F. Richter in 1935. So you can see here, guys, 1 is like common, not even felt, 2, or in between 1 and 2, common, not felt. You get it, going up. So where we are between 4 and 5 is a moderate earthquake. 5 and 6, moderate, some property damage. And then if you look at number 9, massive, near total destruction. So the one that caused damage in Japan, that was 2011, that was a 9, right? You can see San Francisco, Japan, Chile's not on here. And then Alaska, 1964. Alaska has some big quakes. The angle of that plate subduction is really intense though. But it just give you an idea of, like I said, this is all factored by 10. So from 1 to 2 is 10 times greater, and then 2 to 3 is 10 times greater. Like the one we had today was like 4.8, right? It was here. So almost getting into the property damage area. And one of the protocols that it triggered a level 1 response for the city of Vancouver. And so what that means is that public infrastructure has to be inspected now. So structural engineers will go out, they'll inspect the bridges, the roads, make sure that everything's safe, right? If stuff is old and hasn't been seismically updated, that can be a little concerning. Some things weren't built to withstand earthquakes, right? Like nowadays when they build bridges or skyscrapers or a lot of buildings, everything is seismic code, right? There's a seismic code out here, like for welding, when you're welding caisson piles, like, pile foundations and stuff for bridges and buildings and stuff, you use seismic welding wire. You use a special it's really annoying wire to weld with too. It's meant to take seismic stress. I made a video about the Golden Gate, the seismic isolation program in San Francisco. Make sure you check that out. That video just came out. Same thing though, right? What they're doing there is they're trying to minimize the bridge's contact with the ground, in the sense that stresses from the ground won't be transferred into the bridge. So if the earth is shaking and putting a whole bunch of stress into the bridge, these seismic isolation plates will dissipate that force before it makes its way up into the bridge, right, and starts causing issues. So it triggered a level 1 response alert today, which I think has gotten everybody a little bit kind of, thinking about it. Because like I said, if we're in for something that could be 40 to 50 times worse than it was today. So that's hard to imagine. And so like, what would something that's 40 to 50 times worse than what we had today look like? There's a lot of things to unpack here, guys. For example, water, hydro, and fuel, like gas lines, would all be ruptured, right? So you'd have gas leaking, water mains would be blowing up everywhere, ripped apart. Roads would be impassable. Bridges, like I said, depending on how they were built and when they were built and what modernization's been done, like the Golden Gate had a seismic retrofit. Docks, BC Ferries today had to postpone a ferry docking because they were worried about damage to the dock. So that's another thing, so there's a lot going on here, right? But like what would the end result of like something that's 40 to 50 times worse be? Well, we know there'd be tsunamis because it would most likely happen offshore where the big boundary is, when the plate slips basically, and if it slips a lot, then you get a big earthquake. We're due for one because scientists at the University of Washington, they were trying to figure out, how frequently this happens. And so, but there's no real records from back in the day. So what they did was they looked at tribal folklore, tribal stories, and they referenced like 40 different tribes, and they all had a report of like a really scary, devastating eruption that happened around 1700. And so then scientists were able to, with looking at like tsunamis and stuff and calculating, doing a whole bunch of science-esque kind of things, they were able to calculate how many earthquakes would have occurred over the last 10,000 years. And they said about 41 earthquakes over the last 10,000 years, which equates to 322 and a half years, basically. And so it could be anywhere from 250 to 300 years or more. But basically, if you do the math, 1700, 2025, we're right in that spot, guys. It's been talked about for a long time and like, are we ready? Is the region of Cascadia really ready? Because if this earthquake did happen, it would cut us off from the rest of North America. All of our roads would be cut off. The roads, the mountains, because you'd have landslides that would block the roads. That's another problem. When you get that really violent shaking, it causes, a whole bunch of secondary and tertiary effects. Like you get landslides, and those landslides cause flooding because the rivers get blocked. All kinds of catastrophic things could happen, guys. Not to mention, getting food and water and stuff in. And there's nothing to, like, not trying to be, make anybody scared here, but it is definitely something to think about. And today's earthquake has kind of brought those thoughts up for everybody again, I guess. And then obviously tsunamis, like anybody that's on the coast, because if that big Cascadia earthquake happens, the whole coast of Oregon, Vancouver Island, Washington, it's going to cause some real problems, right? And then you can get secondary and tertiary waves as well. Like it's not just one. You get a couple different cycles of it. It's a pretty big deal. And like I said, the root cause of all of this is that you've got a big mantle plume out in the Pacific Ocean that's basically pushing the plates around, and then they're contacting our continent, basically going down under. And then as they're going down under, they can slip and all kinds of things can happen, and that's causing these earthquakes to occur. And like I said, a lot of the times, guys, like we have earthquakes all the time here, right? But you don't feel most of them, and most of them occur like way offshore, the places we can't really see. So I just thought I'd show you an interesting picture here too. This is December 24th, 2019, Seattle Times. This was like a series of earthquakes, 8:44 a.m., 11:13, 11:49, and it shows you, 6.0, 5.6, 4.7, 5.1. We get these kind of earthquakes, but this one happened inland. It happened over here, really close to the shore. They usually happen offshore a lot, which is why we don't really notice them. But if you travel to Vancouver Island, like when we were up in Gold River, or like, you're out in Tofino, there's tsunami warning signs. And even in Vancouver, when you're out the docks or you're by the water, you'll see tsunami warning signs because, if these are big enough or for whatever reason, they could cause waves, right? And then all these like Tofino, all these communities, right, you see down near Washington here, it could cause some major problems. And even inland for Vancouver, it'll cause a lot of problems. See, these are all earthquakes. And this is their explorer plates right here. So this is the Juan de Fuca plate. And then this is the explorer plate. And so you can have a lot of issues right in this area. And you can see, look at all the earthquakes everywhere. Red being a day, like how old are these, right? From January 4th, 2025, right? So basically a month ago. During 2024, 1,262 earthquakes, magnitude 0 to 6.4, located off the south coast of BC. Several were felt, most were offshore along active faults. And us being in the cities closer in the mainland and stuff, you don't really feel it. But out here, you might feel it a little bit more. You can see here near Seashell, this is today's news, 5.1. Some are saying it was a 5.1. Some are saying 4.8. This is the USGS intensity map. So blue/white, it's not that intense. So you can see here we were, light moderate. So it was pretty light for a lot of people, but it was scary, guys. It definitely makes people think. Happened at 1:26, 33 seconds UTC, 49 by 123 latitude and longitude. Yeah, right here, the star, basically. That's where they're saying it happened. This is the Juan de Fuca plate, and it's moving 36 millimeters a year, guys, into North America, right? And then, like I said, you've got the Explorer plate up here. This is going to be developing story for me. We don't usually do this kind of stuff on the channel, but this is highly relevant to the stuff I talk about, you know, with volcanoes and stuff. Also the cause of the volcanoes, right? Feeding the magma and the lava and stuff. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment too, guys. I'd love to get your opinions if you felt or experienced anything, or if you've been in earthquakes around the world. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and Sasquatch Prospector out.